Welcome to our Sound for Video session. Today is the 29th of November 2020, and we have some pretty exciting things to talk about today, so let's go ahead and jump on over to our agenda, and we'll take a look at things there. All right, first of all, we're using a different microphone today. Earthworks just announced a brand new set of microphones they call the Icon and the Icon Pro. We're using the Icon Pro today. And let me just kind of tell you a little bit about that. So there's one is a USB microphone, one is a just an XLR microphone. And let me just show you some of the information that they've put up on their website about it. So, all right. Before I get into that, let me talk about the founder of Earthworks a little bit, because I think there's kind of an interesting story there. The founder is a fellow by the name of David Blackmer, and he's actually, this is interesting, in the audio gear world, there's these kind of almost lineages, and many of us have heard of Rupert Neve, for example, and he actually started a number of different companies, and it's kind of a similar thing with David Blackmer. So he started DBX. He originally designed the DBX noise reduction system and then founded the DBX company, which, for those that are familiar, for example, with the 286S, the channel strip, very popular. He's the one that actually started that company. And then later on, he started, I think Earthworks was something that he started a little bit later in his career. And Earthworks makes some very nice, high-quality microphones. In fact, without any question, my favorite microphone for my particular voice is the Earthworks SR314 that I've been using up until this point for the last 5 months or so. But in any case, there comes kind of some interesting things. He had, let me just read this one point here, one of the things that Blackmer worked on was extending the frequency response of audio electronics beyond the conventionally accepted audible range of 20 kilohertz. He also published research on the value of ultrasonic frequencies in sound reproduction, claiming that the time resolution of human hearing is 5 microseconds or better, which would correspond to a frequency of 200 kilohertz, requiring audio equipment ideally to have a flat response to that frequency. Now, there's a lot that I don't really understand about all this, but I think the main idea is that in his microphone designs, what he tried to do was to create microphones that were he cared what happened after 20 kilohertz in terms of frequency response on the microphones, because his idea was that if you can manage and keep it relatively flat even after 20 kilohertz, that you can get in the frequencies that we do here, I think that you can get an overall better response. So I don't know if that's right. If it's not right, I don't know how much validity there is to that, but I think that was one of the kind of the thoughts that he used in the microphone designs. So in any case, that's kind of some background information on Earthworks. Now, Earthworks traditionally has made high-end microphones, premium microphones. They are not the types of things that you would see in like home studios necessarily. But a lot of what I knew them for originally were their measurement microphones. So here, for example, they have the M23, the 23R, the 30, and the 50. So these, for example, evidently are able to measure up to 50 kilohertz. Again, as you can see, price-wise, they're not cheap, but these are omnidirectional measurement microphones that are typically used by, they're oftentimes used by live mixers for larger venues when they're trying to set up for a show. For example, they'll use these to help manage any sort of feedback or distortions that are occurring within the room. So they'll use these measurement microphones to get a sense for what's happening there and be able to pinpoint the frequencies that they want to manage. They're also used in scientific purposes. They're used in setting up mixing rooms and things of that nature. So that's kind of where I first heard of Earthworks. Of course, they make a variety of microphones for music purposes. I've heard a lot of drummers using these as overhead microphones as well, with fantastic results. But let's go and talk a little bit more about the Icon series. So the Icon series is this new series. Again, there's a USB version. And I should say right now, you are hearing the Icon Pro since the live stream started. And I don't know, do we have any processing on this, Emma? Let's look up at the console out real quick.
High pass.
Okay, just got a high pass filter, and we've got some really minor kind of EQ using, or sorry, not EQ, but compression using the modeled LA2A compressor. And I don't think I'm hitting it very often here. So in any case, just so that you understand what you're hearing, two versions. There's the USB version called the Icon, which runs $349, the Icon Pro, which is their XLR version of, and these, at first I thought, okay, same microphone, one's USB, one's XLR. Looks like they're actually a little bit different. So here are the specs for the USB version. Again, these are small diaphragm cardioid, small diaphragm condenser microphones with cardioid polar patterns. And you can see here the specs are largely the same. Let's see, you can see here one thing that's different is frequency response on the Pro version goes up to 30 kilohertz, they say. It looks like there's a little bit more max sound pressure levels on the Pro version, 7 dB more. Let's see, signal to noise ratio appears to be the same on both. Noise in terms of self-noise is both 15 dB SPLA weighted. So we don't get a lot of other specs beyond that. Let me just pull down the user guide here, and you can see there wasn't a lot going on there either. Like no polar pattern graphs, no frequency response graphs. Maybe we'll see those here in the next little bit. These were just literally announced on Friday, and I got mine on Saturday? Friday. Oh, I got mine on Friday too. I think, so anyway, that's kind of the story between those two. That's a little bit of background on the founder of Earthworks and where they're coming from. From my point of view, the SR314, let's go ahead and get you a sample of that as well. If you give us just a second here, we're using a software mixer, so it takes a couple of seconds here to switch it over. Just 1 second.
Mute.
Okay, can you hear me okay? All right, now we're back on the SR314. So this is the microphone that I've been using probably for the last 5 months or so for my live streams. And this is a $700 microphone, so it's a little bit more than the Icon Pro, which is a $500 microphone. This one's a little bit larger. You can't really see the whole thing here. Let me just pull this. This is the Icon here. There we go. And I'm going to pull this out of the clip. Give me just a second here. You'll hear a little bit of noise. Sorry. And I'm going to leave the wind cover on for now. Size-wise, you can see they're a little bit different. The SR314 is definitely longer. Actually, let me go ahead and pull that off. You're going to hear this. Be ready. Going back on. Okay, SR314 is really designed as a handheld vocal microphone. So I think really kind of the point was it was going to be mainly for musicians. And this one is very much made for, I think they were billing it as for serious streamers or professional streamers. And I think that's a fair way to put it. What I like about the new one, and this one's off right now currently. Wait. Which one's on?
They're both on.
Okay, let's turn one of them off.
The new one? Channel 1?
Okay, we're done with the SR314. One moment here, we're going to turn this off, and we're going to come back to this one.
We are unmuted.
SR314 is now off. We're back on the Icon Pro. The mounting mechanism or the clip, typically you have a clip that will allow you to attach it to a stand, of course. What's really kind of neat about the Icon Pro is that they're using a triad orbit, kind of a ball head. What's neat about that is it gives you a little bit more freedom to kind of get it aimed and positioned just right. And Triad Orbit makes really, really great stuff. All of their gear that I've seen, unfortunately I don't own any of it, but it's the kind of stuff that you buy basically once in your career and it should last the majority of your career. But this one gives you a little bit more freedom to move things around. Let me just show you here. If you loosen this nut, Definitely a little bit more freedom there. You're hearing some of this, so sorry. Okay, there we are. So there's the Icon Pro. Obviously, we'll be doing a full review here in the next few weeks to get you a better look at kind of the in-depth features. And as I have an opportunity to have a little more experience with it, use it a little bit more, put some other voices on it, and things of that nature. But it's I'm really actually quite delighted to see Earthworks providing microphones that are a little bit more affordable. Now, some people are going to go, "What? This is not affordable. This is not an affordable microphone." I really kind of view the Earthworks microphones as an investment. They're kind of you can buy them once and they should last your entire career. And like if I never had to buy another microphone again for live streaming and I had the SR314, I'd be set and I would have I can't imagine another microphone that would really kind of change the world for me. So maybe this one. It wouldn't change the world for me, but it would be a less expensive way to get into one than this 314. And it actually seems like it's better suited for the job. Again, because this mount is so adjustable. I really like that about it. So that's a nice step up from the 314, which really, again, was made as a stage performance vocal mic. So, all right, I think we've probably beat that one to death. Let's move on, unless there's any questions. Any questions on the microphone yet?
There are no questions. There's a funny comment. Would you like to hear it?
Okay, so yeah, we're going to talk about our setup here a little bit. It's a little awkward, so thanks for sticking in there with us. This is evolving. We're going to talk about this more in just a minute, but go ahead and tell me the comment.
Vandrew Scott is in the chat. He says, also, Curtis, why is a Shelford channel in your description? Did you get a Neve Shelford? You mad lad, in all caps.
Yes, Bandrew, we do have a Shelford channel in the house. And I'm blaming you for that purchase. Well, actually, it was partly Lloyd and it's partly you. So thanks, Bandrew. That's another story for another time. We'll come back to that one. But let's just stay on topic here. But hopefully that was helpful for you in terms of the Icon Pro, getting a little sample here. And again, as I said, we will be back with a much more in-depth review. I think Bandrew asked, how did you get your hands on it? The answer to that is, this was sent to me. Full disclosure, this was sent to me free of charge from Earthworks in exchange to do a video review, that's the one I'll be doing coming up here. The nice thing about working with Earthworks so far is that they haven't been heavy-handed in terms of saying you have to say this about it or that about it, you have to do this or you have to do that. They just said, here's a microphone, do an honest review. We appreciate it. And they actually, I think, my SR314 review, I think, is posted on their website. So there's the full disclosure. Okay.
One question.
We have a question about the microphone. Let's talk about it. When we get into the chat questions later, we're actually going to have a microphone for Emma so that she can read them. And I know this will all make sense more, but here's a question. Okay.
From Lloyd, do they provide the Triad Orbit mount with the mic?
Do they provide the Triad Orbit mount with the mic? This is from Lloyd. Lloyd, the answer is yes, they do. So that's a really nice feature. So instead of a traditional microphone clip, the Triad Orbit comes with it. Incidentally, the mic body itself has a 5/8 inch female receiver. So you could use other things as well, but that's how you attach the Triad Orbit ball mount to the microphone itself. And yes, it does come with a mic. That's part of the price. The USB version also has one on a little desk stand. So I don't know if on the USB version you can detach the ball mount and put it on a proper, not a proper, but a different stand. That would be nice if you could, but I don't know the answer to that one yet. So, all right. Let's go and head back to our agenda here. So next up, we need to talk a little bit about Fairlight. So I have a good story here. This almost didn't happen today, and it's going to be fairly limited today. I was up last night working on this, getting everything set up, kind of putting together an agenda and what I was going to talk about in Fairlight. And the way I did this is I cannot afford to put beta software on my main computer. So we had it installed on a separate computer, which is why everything is completely different today. And we'll talk about this more in a minute. But I installed it and I started working with it, and I was, going along, da 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 da. This is neat. Oh wow, look at this new feature. And then the screen started pulsing like a strobe light. And I mean, the UI was still there, but it was pulsing, and I was like, it giving me a headache. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? And at first I thought, okay, that's probably the switcher or the converter box that is responsible for taking the signal from the computer. It changes its frame rate from, and this is silly, it has to go from 30 frames per second to 29.97 to get it into the switcher. Longer story, we'll come back to that. But it wasn't that. It was the actual computer was doing it. So I was going to bag the whole thing and say, okay, Fairlight has a bug. I'll submit a bug report, and we'll catch another beta at some point in the future. This morning we've been working on it, and it's been okay so far. So if we're going to go ahead and jump into Fairlight a little bit, I'm not going to go nearly as in depth as I was going to, but we're going to cover a few things, some of my new feature or some of the features that I like, and a couple of questions that we had about it, and then we'll go to our question and answer. So let's go ahead and make that transition here. Pull that up. Okay. I'm going to put my headphones on here. Now, so here's the UI. First question that we had come up, actually I'm going to have to take those off because there's a little bit of a delay there. First question we had actually had to do with the sound library. So we're in the Fairlight panel, you can see here, and I'm going to come into the sound library. Now, there are a few things you can do here. You can actually use the included Fairlight sound library, or you can also create a local database. And if you do that, you add a library here and you just choose where your sound effects are stored, and you can add them in here. So that's the first thing you need to do is if you do have your own database of sounds, you'll want to load that in here. Here, for example, I don't have those on this computer. This is not my primary computer, again, so I don't have all of my own sound library on here. But let's just show you how you would use this. So with the Fairlight sound library, for example, if I wanted to get some door sounds, I would just type door in the search, and you can see that brings up a whole bunch of different options here. And let's just play through a couple of these here. So to play through them, I just click and then play. All right, that's not bad. Not what I was looking for. Car door. Cool. And then once you find the one that you want, you can just drop it down in the timeline. And let's just play a little of this. Doesn't make any sense in this context, but
Doing some things to do with audio engineering recently. What are your impressions maybe of doing
so there's Emma talking as she's getting into a car. So that's kind of the general idea with the sound library. There's not a lot more to it. It's pretty straightforward, which is a beautiful thing. It should be easy. You can also choose which fields you want to search by if you want to just choose the name, or if you want to go into the description as well. Here's just the name. Here's the description. So I believe that would be on metadata. But it's a pretty nice system here. You use this little drop down here to choose which library you're searching or working with. And then this is where the waveform shows. So that's the main idea there. This included library is not bad. If you look at there's some footsteps, and here's one in the dirt, for example. We can drop that down. So Emma's going to walk through the dirt, and then oops, we're going to undo that. We need to move this down to a new track. She's going to walk in the dirt while she's talking, and then get into her car. Oh, whoop! I did that bad. I put it on the wrong track. There we go. Okay. So let's try that.
mix as a first timer?
It can be as complicated or
Okay, a couple of things. Here's actually an opportunity to talk about a feature that actually was introduced in 16 somewhere. This track right here where Emma's talking is really, really quiet. I can right-click on that, come up to normalize audio levels, and I can actually loudness normalize that. So I can use the ITU RBS 1770 loudness standard. Here, I'm going to go ahead and leave my true peak ceiling at -2 and the target loudness at 23. This will actually normalize this clip for us. So now when we play it back, let's see what we get now.
Okay, so since we booked...
Really quiet. Let's bump that up. We can just set our true peak if we wanted to do that. Let's just bump this to -19. There we go.
Okay, so since we've both been doing some things to do with audio engineering recently, what are your impressions maybe of doing a mix as a first-timer?
It can be as
Way too loud.
As a first-timer.
it can be as
Anyway, you get the idea. So that's how you would use the sound effects library. Obviously, this is completely nonsensical. It doesn't make any sense at all whatsoever what we've just done here. But just to show you the tools that are available to you, I want to talk a little bit about the loudness up here as well. This is something I've gotten a lot of questions about. Now, there are a few things you can do. So when you're working on a project and you know where the project is going to be viewed or experienced, what you'll want to do is come up to File, Project Settings. You'll come into Fairlight, and then here's where you set your target loudness. So for example, if our overall target loudness is going to be, we're going to a theater, for example, United States. This is actually the US TV broadcast standard is -24. Let's just go ahead and set it at that. Let's go ahead and pause, or sorry, let's not pause, let's reset it. What I can do now is I just play through this, press start, go ahead and play through this, and it's going to measure relative to that standard, that -24.
Okay, so since we've both been doing some things to do with audio engineering recently, what are your impressions maybe of doing a mix as a first-timer?
it can be as complicated or complex as you want it to be.
Very much so.
Okay, so you can see right now, relative to our target of -24, we're doing pretty well. We're only at -0.5 right now, so things are pretty close, or on the peak level. Here, our integrated level, we're actually quite a ways off yet, so we have some more work to do. But overall, that's the idea of how the overall loudness works. And again, you have to reset it and start it. Now, one thing you can do, which is a nice new feature in 17, is I can actually offline measure the loudness of any individual clip. So for example, this clip right here with Emma talking, I can come up here and analyze the audio levels. And if I use a target standard, so here in the United States, we probably use this here, analyze, runs through that clip, and it says, okay, right now your true peak is at 14.5 dB full scale. We have some work to do there for sure, but its overall loudness is at -23. That doesn't seem right. And maybe it's tracking these somehow, and it's processing at 32-bit. So that's probably what this is about right here. So we would need to, and actually what I can do here, whoops, drop that down. It's been a while since I've done this, so I'm going to have to work on this. But you can drop, we could just, oh, okay, so we've already changed that here. We could put some keyframes on here and just kind of, this is just the clapping at the start, and there's some laughing or something. But we can just manage all of that, or even just chop it off entirely. Here we go. Back to our regular tools. Okay. All right, we're going to go into more detail on that in a future one, but those are kind of some of the main things I wanted to take a look at right now. There are some new features. The whole audio engine is changed now, and so I'm really curious to see how it works. So here, for example, this is with a 32-bit float file. It looks like they fixed the issues with the waveforms, which were not rendering correctly. You can see here as I, move them up and then bring them back down, or even here where we started, it's retaining all of that exceeds 0 dB full scale. So they fixed and it was already processing it correctly technically, but it was not displaying it correctly. So having the right display is really helpful as well. So that's been fixed. Nice nice move forward. The new audio engine can evidently handle 2,000 simultaneous tracks if your computer can handle that. If you're doing 2,000 tracks, I think you might want to reevaluate your mix. I think that even on the feature films, like even the superhero feature films, are probably in the hundreds, probably not even exceeding 200 tracks. But in any case, it can handle that. So the idea is, I think, building for the future here for some reason if you need to go that crazy. So there's just a quick look at Fairlight, and we'll go ahead and head into our question and answer now. Okay, let's see what we've got here. Okay. So the first question was from James, and he actually asked about the sound library in Fairlight, which we've already covered, so we're going to go ahead and move on. So thanks for that, James. That's part of what drove what we wanted to share there today. I don't know if you were looking for more details. If there are more specific questions, definitely let me know. All right, there's a question from Andrew. Today I'm almost finished editing my first podcast when Auditions shut down. It let me save my work as it was doing so, but now I can't seem to open the PKF files I thought contained my project files, and it gives this error here. I'm trying to locate some auto-saved Audition files that might lay somewhere with no luck at this stage. Looks like I may have to redo it. Oh well. My computer knowledge has been limited to using Final Cut Pro on a Mac, and I was hoping you could help me understand a good file management workflow for Audition, including a good saving strategy. So that's a fine question. Let's go ahead and I'm going to pop over here into Audition, and let's take a look here. Now, first of all, I think the thing you need to understand, Andrew, is that the PKF files are that's not your session files. Those are just, all the PKF files do is they are a render of the waveform, the graphics. They're literally graphic files. And it just makes it so that Audition doesn't have to work so hard, especially if you're in multi-track mode, where it has to display a whole bunch of different tracks. All it does is it's rendering those out ahead of time, so it doesn't have to redo that every time you go back into the multi-track session. You don't technically need those. I think that those were developed back in the days when computers were not quite as fast and Audition wasn't quite as mature. At this point, I just turn them off, and there's a way you can turn them off. If you come up here into the Audition menu, to Preferences, come down to, I think it's the Media and Disk Cache, is that right? Yes. And you'll notice down here, there's this little Save Peak Files. By default, that's actually checked. I uncheck it, so it doesn't put those silly peak files all over my drives. And my computer's fast enough that I don't ever really have problems with rendering of the waveforms. So that's one thing you can do. You don't have to do that, but that's just a tip in case you're interested in not having those peak files all over. So we'll go ahead and save that. Now, as far as finding your file, what you are looking for is what's called a sesx file, .sesx. That's your session file. That's what's saved in the multitrack. So for example here, what you might do to find the one that you saved previously is come up into the File menu and open Recent. That will show you all of the different files and sessions that you've worked on. The files will be the waveforms. That would be, something you just editing an individual waveform. The sessions would be your multi-track sessions. So here, for example, is a recent one that I worked on. Now, if it doesn't show up in that list, what you can also do is, of course, come into the Finder and do a search for .sesx. That'll probably just work here. For example, it's selected to desktop. I'm going to change it to this Mac. That'll show me all of the different sessions that are on my computer here. So that can help you find it as well, potentially. But that's the main thing. So as far as file saving strategy, just save your files periodically. One thing I do too is when you do save it the first time when you open a multi-track session, Audition will ask you if you want to consolidate all the files or to copy all the files into the folder that you created for your session. I would recommend doing that. I'd also recommend, before heading down a path, especially if you're working on a really important project, you should have a copy of all of the raw files and then the work copy. And you should work from the work copy, and that's the folder in which you should put your session file. So that way, if you do really botch something up, because Audition can do destructive editing. If you go into the waveform view, anything like if I double click this clip right here, if I come in here and I apply an effect without just using the effects rack, if I actually come up here into effects and apply something, like let's do an EQ really quickly. Just do kind of an extreme EQ here, apply that. Now I've changed the waveform. And that's a destructive change. So if I save that, that gets saved into the original file. So that's why you should have probably a backup copy. I'll go ahead and undo that. Let's come back here. There, undo. Okay. You can see here in, let's get rid of these markers here. So in this particular case here, this is just a session, a simple 2-person interview. This was part of the the review that we just posted this morning. So the Tentacle Sync Track E review. This is the interview that Emma and Danny had here, and you can see I've kind of railroaded it already, cut out the portions. So here, for example, is Danny's portion. When she wasn't talking here, I cut out her portion and I did these fades to fade in and out. That's kind of just basic mixing types of things you might want to do for a podcast as well. You can automate that instead. You don't have to do, this is kind of the more film workflow. I think if you were working on a podcast, a lot of time what I do for a podcast is I hook up a control interface or a control surface, and I just automate down the, I just pull the faders down when a person's not talking and fade it back up. So that can make it go a little bit more quickly. Although some people say, well, once you get good at doing this railroading, you can do this really quickly too. So it's kind of just a matter of preference. You can see I accidentally left off a fade here and here, like that. So there's some thoughts, Andrew, on kind of a workflow for your sessions. Hopefully that gets you what you need there and get you on your way. If not, go ahead and shoot us another email and we'll definitely help you through that as well. Okay. Next up from Ted, we have a question about his Shure SM7B. I record my voice doing voiceover for online courses I create. The SM7B plugs into a Grace Design M101 mic preamp. Very nice. And then that goes into a UAD Apollo Twin-X Turbo, or Twin-X Duo, not Turbo, Thunderbolt. I believe you mentioned you like Century Tube, Channel Strip, and Pultec UAD plugins. Do you have some presets you like for those when processing male voice? Okay, let's talk about that a little bit. So I am going to show you my console, my Universal Audio console here. Let me just pull that up. Okay. All right, so just to show you what we have here, this one is not the one that we're actually using right now. We don't have anything hooked up to this, so I'm not going to be able to demonstrate this in that level of detail, but let me just show you my typical, I'm actually usually using a Pultec, a Legacy EQ, and also the LA2A compressor. So just in terms of what I'm doing here, I'm really just using, in my particular case, I'm using the Pultec EQP1A to manage sibilance just a little bit. So what I do is I kind of dial in where the sibilance is on my voice, and usually sibilance is going to fall somewhere between 5 and 8 kilohertz, so somewhere between here. And then what I do is I dial in the amount of attenuation here. Of course, you have to make sure it's on. This portion, this portion is off right here. But so that's the idea. So here I'm just kind of pulling down about whatever between 3 and 4 is. I don't know I don't think that refers to dB exactly. I'm not positive, but and then also here's the bandwidth. That's how wide. That's like a Q, how wide an area you're affecting of the overall EQ. Now this is a classic EQ. And I think the most important thing here is to use your ears. Don't worry so much about the numbers, but once you find something that you've dialed in, you can actually save it as a preset. So you just come in here and you can click save. So once you find something that works well for your voice, but again, as you're kind of setting these, it's helpful if you have someone else that can do it on your voice, if that's what you're doing it for. Or if you're setting it up for someone else's voice, you have them talk through it while you're adjusting the settings. Or what actually can be the most helpful, if you are doing it for your own voice, make a recording first, then play that back through here and adjust these settings to get them kind of dialed in for what works best for your particular voice. So also, if you need any documentation, there is this little question mark down in the corner. You can go ahead and pull up the manual and it'll talk you through kind of the details here. This really kind of gives you it almost felt like marketing material a little bit, which made me smile a little bit. But here, for example, the EQP1A, which is what we're used on a myriad of recordings from the 50s to today, the 3-band tube amplified EQP1A program equalizer has long been a studio staple of recording and mix engineers for its ability to bring out individual frequency ranges without significantly altering neighboring frequencies. This unit is equally famous for its ability to dial in seemingly dangerous amounts of boost and famously smooth as silk vintage tone. Also known as the quintessential magic studio piece that makes audio simply sound better just by passing through it. In any case, that's really neat, but it does give you some a little bit more detailed information here as well. So it gives you cycles per second. It's talking about cycles per seconds as opposed to kilohertz. So anyway, it'll give you some more information down there. So if you do need that kind of info, that's available there. Now, as far as the compressor, what I'm doing here with the compressor is, this is the way I generally think of these classic kind of compressors. You usually have some sort of gain or drive setting. And essentially what that's doing is it's almost like there's a fixed threshold and you're boosting up the signal to get it kind of dialed into the right amount of threshold. So what I would do is probably set the peak reduction somewhere in the 30 to 40 range. I'm trying to do something that's fairly transparent, not super obvious, but just kind of tame some of the transients and boost the overall level a little bit. So I would put this somewhere around 30 and then move this gain back and forth again as you're talking or as you're playing back a recording of your voice. And that'll help you kind of dial in the particular levels you'll want. It's especially useful to do this one when you're actually talking into it as opposed to playing back a recording. Just makes it a little easier to get the levels where you want it. And what will happen is when it's doing that, the little needle will be at 0 until it's doing gain reduction. And what I'm aiming for here, typically, I don't want to do a whole lot more than 3 or 5 dB on dialogue, spoken word stuff. If you're finding yourself up here in the 10 to 20 range, you're probably compressing too hard. So you probably want to dial back the gain a little bit and or dial back the peak reduction a little bit. So to get that meter working to show you the gain reduction, just make sure this knob over here is set to gain reduction. All right. I think that's everything we wanted to cover on that particular question. So hopefully that helps a little bit there, Ted. And let's see what else we've got here. Go ahead and pull up our questions again. Okay. And then Ted asks a follow-up question. I don't know if you'll want to answer this during this session or a future session or offline, but it would be great to hear or see what you use for your live casting setup. What mics, what audio interfaces, what software, what people are working in concert with you to produce them. Okay, that's a fair question. This is where I'm going to talk a little bit about this evolving story here. We have a lot going on behind the scenes that we talked about it a little bit last week, but kind of the short answer, Ted, is that I've been doing live streams now since 2015, on and off, mostly on, and mostly the kind of, just to give you some background information, and then I'll talk about all the gear and the mics and the software and all that business. When I launched my first course in 2015, we launched what we call now the Sound for Video sessions. And the idea is to, when you have an online course, if you get stuck, it's kind of frustrating because there's not necessarily a good way to get an answer to your question from the instructor. And I wanted to make sure that there was a way for people to get in touch with me and ask questions and get unstuck. So that's the purpose of these Sound for Video sessions initially. Now, there was a period of time where early on in the school, we weren't getting a lot of questions. And so I started just making other tutorials every week. And we kind of stopped doing live streams for a while, but now we're back into it. When we got back into it, and those early ones were just ugly from a technical point of view. They were horrible, horrible live streams. It was me on a webcam with no lighting, and it was a really bad webcam. I usually used a decent microphone, but then they were usually out of sync because I was using an audio interface, and anyway, they were pretty horrible. So we're trying to improve that a little bit, make it a better experience for the viewers. And so over the years, this whole setup has evolved. So what eventually happened probably 3 years ago was I invested in a capture device. I had Blackmagic make some, and also AJA make some. And in fact, I can pull one out here. Give me just a second. This particular one is an SDI version, but they also make and I also have although I lent it out to a friend, an HDMI version. But essentially what you do is you plug in the camera on one side and there's a USB output on the other side. So just a capture device. This feeds the video stream and any audio with it into the computer, and then you can use that to live stream using whatever encoding app you choose to use. So we did that for a while. Eventually we got an app called Ecamm Live, and that runs only on Mac, but that's what we're using today, in fact. And what that allows is some pretty interesting things in terms of being able to show the chat up on screen. So Emma, do you have a chat you could just pop up there? Somebody's gonna be up on the screen here pretty soon. Yep, okay. There's Ted. Ted, you're on the screen. So that's one of the neat things that this allows you to do. But then shortly after that, Blackmagic announced their ATEM mini line of switchers. And let me see if I can pull this up here without yanking everything off the desk. We've talked about this. Whoop. We're going to have to disconnect one more cable. Locking power cable. There we go. So this is kind of neat because it's a capture card. It has 4 HDMI. Can you see that? Yeah, 4 HDMI inputs and HDMI output. So basically what this is like the actual production switchers made in a really mini version for enthusiasts as opposed to kind of the professional broadcast world. And so it's a capture card. It has scalers built into it, which I'll talk about those in just a minute. It has a switcher built into it. So it just does a lot more stuff. And that helped us. We moved to these. We bought our first ATEM Mini, I think, in late 2019. So I think we got one in October or November. And that really kind of opened up some other opportunities to make things a little richer, to bring in overhead cameras so I could do product demonstrations and kind of walkthroughs, stuff like that. So that was really nice. And then they came out with the Pro version, which also had an encoder on it, which basically meant you could stream directly from the ATEM Mini Pro to YouTube. You didn't have to use an app on your computer, which was good in some respects. It kind of offloaded a lot of that, and it freed up the computer to become an input. Well, a more graceful input for doing screen demonstrations. So we got one of those, and then those have been great. I think those are really an awesome piece of hardware and amazing for the price. So they're HD, and they're amazing because they have scalers and frame rate converters built in. They're amazing because they also have the Fairlight engine in it. So you can do some audio processing as well, which is, I think, important for live streaming. A lot of times you do need to kind of manage your overall levels a little bit, and maybe apply a little bit of EQ because you don't get a chance to come back and post and do that. So it has all those amazing features. It also has the ability to do keying, picture-in-picture, a lot of kind of neat things like that. So now, just recently, and this is the evolving part, this is the currently evolving part, we now have a much bigger switcher, a rack mount switcher in a closet over here. That's a 4K switcher. It's from also Blackmagic. It's the ATEM 2ME Production Studio 4K. And I think that's what it's called. That has a whole lot more inputs. It's mostly SDI based, so it's not as there are only, I think there's only one HDMI input, so it's really made for a more production studio kind of setup where you use SDI connections from your cameras to the switcher. It does not have scalers or frame rate converters built in, so you have to send the correct resolution from your camera and the correct frame rate from your camera for the switcher to even recognize it. And if you don't, it won't recognize it, or you have to use a cross converter or scaler or frame rate converter. So we have some of those on order, and they're supposed to arrive this week. That's part of why this whole setup is so funky right now. So that's where we're in the process of doing right now. Now, I only have one of those scalers right now, and so that's why we only have, right now we're using that to convert the signal from the computer screen that I'm using to demo. And there'll be some more of those arriving so I can bring in additional cameras and additional computers to do different things as well. One of the things I'm trying to get away from is, frankly, I love Ecamm Live, but Ecamm Live also drives me crazy. That's the best way to say it, I think, right? And it drives my poor technical director crazy for a few reasons. The kind of the main the audio implementation in Ecamm Live is a little bit rough from my point of view. And what happens is that we haven't entirely figured out what the meters are doing, but we think that they're pre-fader levels, and when you adjust the faders, so nothing changes on the meters. So you don't really ever have a look at your master bus, what you're sending to the stream. And the monitoring is also a little bit funky. We finally figured out on the Pro version, you can actually plug into the encoding computer, the computer running Ecamm Live, and you can listen to it, monitor it there, but it's delayed, so it's something that you don't want to do if you're producing your own show. It's only something you're going to want to do if someone else is there to do the technical production. So Emma's got the headphones on listening to this, so she's hearing me at a little bit of a delay, probably half a second or maybe approaching a second. So there's some amount of delay there. Something that if you were wearing the headphones and you were on air at the same time, you'd go absolutely nutty crazy. So that doesn't work very well. So that's one of the things that we're trying to get away from. Now, to get away from that, one of the things I do love about Ecamm, again, are those chat comments or the chat that we can put up on screen. It does that extraordinarily well, and I don't want to give that up. So there are other ways to do that, and we can have a computer do that for us. And so once those additional scalers get here, that's what the laptop will do that for us. So we'll actually be able to key that in as a lower third on the bottom of the screen using Aaron Parecki. It's actually, Aaron Parecki customized it and packaged it, but it was another fellow in Japan that originally wrote it. But it's been really good for us. It's worked really pretty well. So what else can I tell you about the overall setup? Microphone. Oh, yeah. So here's part of the thing. So we have this, I wish I had a behind the scenes camera right now. This is what we'll be able to show once we get the other scalers, but I can't show right now. But I have an iMac Pro in front of me, but then Emma's sitting in front of a different computer here. And so she's off to the side. It's a mess. I can't see any of the chat on screen today, so we're going to instead have to hook up a mic so she can read those questions to me as we move into that portion. So in fact, why don't we go ahead and get that set up? So let me go ahead and don't power it on yet. If you give me just a second here, I need to switch out a mic. This is another thing too, is we want to set up a hardware mixer so we don't have to do these little relay games here. So thanks for sticking with us and your patience today. This will be fixed in a future one, but we've got to we're just piece by piece getting this set up. So right now this should be streaming at 4K if you're on Chrome. I think if you're on anything but Safari, you should be able to watch this in 4K. But let me go ahead and pop this microphone in so Emma can talk to us here.
And we're okay. I can hear myself now. We are unmuted.
Okay. All right. Cool. Let's go ahead and go to the chat and see what questions we've got there.
Okay, scrolling all the way back up. I can't wear the headphones. I'm sorry. That is too disorienting.
Okay, you're clipping a little bit, so we're going to want to pull your gain down a little.
Is that on the send over here?
Actually, go pop your gain down maybe to 40.
Okay, how about now?
Go ahead and talk to me.
Let us know in the chat if it's like really, really awful.
That should be a lot better there.
Okay. First one, this is quite a while ago, from Alexi. What do you think about the Deity Connect system? I couldn't find any negative reviews. Now I'm using the G3. It is getting a lot of interference.
Okay. That's a great question. My review, I don't think, was exactly glowing, as I recall. So it was glowing from the standpoint that I'm really proud of Deity, kind of really pushing the boundaries of what a consumer wireless system can do. I still very much consider it a consumer wireless system at 2.4 gigahertz. And so they've really pushed the boundaries of what it can do. It was a dual channel receiver, pretty robust hardware-wise. And in terms of the ability to change settings and kind of adjust, they're one of the few consumer wireless systems, the 2.4 gigahertz systems I've seen, where you can actually tell it to apply more latency if you are having dropouts, to potentially solve that problem. I don't know how well it works necessarily. I haven't run into a lot of problems with that because I don't use the Connect a lot, but I was proud of them for kind of pushing those boundaries and really trying to make it work and doing some innovative things to make it work. On the other hand, what I didn't like about that system is, number one, well, it is a 2.4 gigahertz system, so if I'm doing paid jobs, can be tricky. Like if you get into there are some locations where there's just nothing you can do to make those things work. If there's too much 2.4 gigahertz energy in that space, you have no options. There's nothing you can do to make it work, other than call it a day and say, hey, let's try again tomorrow, or, maybe tell everyone on set to turn off their phones, like actually turn off their, all the radios on their phones, and maybe that would help. You're just kind of stuck. That's the problem there. So the other problem I found with the Deity Connect system was that there was a significant amount of self-noise, I thought. Not only just with the included lavalier microphones, which, with included lavaliers, you always kind of have you should have low expectations. But even when you put a good lavalier microphone on there, even the Deity, the pro level lav mics, there's still a fair bit of self-noise in that situation. Now, if you're doing an interview in a fairly quiet space, that's problematic. If you're doing, some like a walk and talk out on an urban street, that's not going to be a problem. There's going to be so much other actual noise in the, overall recording that you're not going to have to worry about the self-noise. And so in some of my corporate work, we've actually used it and it worked okay in less than ideal circumstances in terms of ambient noise. But as soon as you get in a really quiet space, that's where it really kind of starts to show that ugly noise front. So those are my thoughts about Deity. Now, the Sennheiser systems are... the Sennheiser systems, you have to kind of learn to tune them. If you are getting... I don't know exactly what you're experiencing in terms of interference, or how many channels you're using. If you are using more than 2 channels, go and take a look at our session 3 weeks ago, I think it was, where we had Michael Wynn on talking about wireless. He talked a lot about intermodulation, and it's a concept that I think a lot of people don't understand when they first are starting to work with wireless mic systems. You need to understand how that works, and as soon as you get more than 2 channels of wireless going, things get a lot more complicated. And so there's some things you need to do to set up the frequencies on each of the transmitters and receivers so that you're not interfering. Each of those wireless mic systems are not interfering with each other. So that's some thoughts there. I think a lot of people don't also understand the squelch feature on the Sennheiser G3 and G4 systems. You need to learn how to kind of dial that in as well. Typically, the ideal is to leave it at its low setting, but you may need to bump that up a little bit. And that's going to take care of a lot of you'll get kind of a flapping noise where it kind of goes like that. And so what you're doing is you're just kind of telling it where the noise floor sits, the overall radio frequency noise floor is sitting, so that it's not doing that crackling in and out kind of thing. So definitely play some with that. I don't think the Deity Connect is going to solve your problems if you're having challenges with the Sennheiser system. The Deity Connect is supposed to be easier to use, but it has a different set of problems, and I don't know that it's certainly not an end-all, be-all, fix-all kind of situation. So I think I was talking, I think Lloyd, you and I were talking, Lloyd came on for an interview a couple months ago, and afterwards we were talking a little bit, and I think, Lloyd, you had the Deity Connect system and were expressing some frustration with it. And if I had to guess, based on that conversation, Lloyd, I'm guessing you'd probably rather have a G4 system or a series of G4 because you could work with that and figure it out versus the Deity Connect, where it's just like, there's not a lot of things you can do other than increase the latency. So those are some thoughts. So, all right, next question.
Okay, thank you. Shout out to Rob and Bill for the super chats.
Thanks, guys. Scrolling.
Okay, from Vishal. For a beginner watching your channel, there are a few mics that have stood out. And if you were told you were going to Mars, and you can only pick one, what would you choose?
Depends on what you're recording and whose voice you're recording. Is that the whole question? Okay, well, it depends. If I'm live streaming, I'd probably choose the Earthworks SR314, which Emma's now using, which we demonstrated a little earlier. If I am recording video interviews, I'd probably choose a boom mic, and I'd probably choose my DPA 4017B. Barring that, I'd probably choose the Sennheiser MKH416 at a slightly lower price point. And at an even lower price point, maybe something more like the Rode NTG5. And then a price point lower than that, probably the DADS mic too. That's kind of how I would approach it. If money's no issue, then again, I'd go with the DPA. Did I answer that?
Yeah.
I think so. Okay. I wouldn't choose a lav mic as my only mic, I'll tell you that.
Cool.
Well, unless there was some other requirement that required that prevented me using a boom mic. How about that?
Excellent. For context, Vishal said when he first joined that he was joining from Mars.
Oh, excellent. Welcome from Mars.
Yeah.
I don't know how you got there, but that's pretty cool. I don't know if Elon Musk helped you get there, but that's his goal, I think. All right, scrolling for more comment or more chats here.
Yes, and then he asked later on, actually, what would be a good mic to go with for my XT3? I'm a beginner and can only justify spending on one mic this Christmas. A jack-of-all-trades solution, low noise, low post-processing.
Did we get a budget?
No.
Well, one of those mics I mentioned before. I'd go with one of the shotgun mics, most likely. So tighter budget, DADS mic 2. A little bit more to work with, I'd go with the NTG5 from Rode. A little bit more to work with, I'd go with the Sennheiser MKH416, not to sound like a broken record. And then if I had an unlimited budget, I'd probably go with the DPA 4017B or maybe the Sheps CMIT 5U. That's what I would do.
Cool. Please remember to drink water.
Oh yeah, drink water, okay.
For those of you around the world, it's very dry in Utah. That's why we sound a little gravelly. Apologies. From Mr. Hammett. Not really sound for video related again, but can the F6 play external files, meaning other files you didn't record on it? The H6 couldn't, and this was one beef people had with it.
Ooh, I don't know. I haven't tried. But it should be able to read any sort of WAV file, I would think. I haven't specifically tried that, Mr. Hammett. But if you drop them on the SD card, I would think it would be able to play them. We'll have to do a test. Let's do something real quick. Give me just a minute. The question was for the F6, right?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if we have a card in there. We don't have a card. This might be a tough one to answer here, Mr. Hammett. If you wouldn't mind, I'll just ask you to do this. If you are not signed up at the school.learnlightandsound.com, go ahead and sign up and opt into the email list. What that does is I will send you an email every week, usually on Saturday, just saying, hey, we're going to have a live stream. If you have a question, just reply to me here. If you could do that, reply with this question, I will actually do the test ahead of time, and I'll be able to answer that question for you. Or if you don't want to sign up for the list, that's fine too. Just email me at curtis@learnlightandsound.com, and we'll go ahead and put that on the agenda for next week. All right.
Okay. From Antonio. I record my work meetings using the MixP3. MixPre3. This is why you don't let the director talk. I'm sorry. ISO tracks 1, 2, and 3 are armed. I have several files, polyformic wave, that are big and heavy, that are bass heavy in the end. Sorry. Do you want me to read it again?
No, you're good. Keep going.
That's it.
Wait, so we have... You better read it again.
Okay. Antonio records his work meetings using the
Wow, twice now. MixP3. That could be the new naming let's call the marketing department at Sound Devices and see if we get that changed.
Extend my apologies to them, please.
Okay.
ISO tracks 1, 2, and 3
Okay.
are armed. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I have several files, polyformic wave, that are bass heavy in the end.
Okay, you're probably going to want to apply some low cut or high pass filtering. That'd be my first thing, and actually you can do that during the recording. I don't know exactly how you're hooked up to the. Well, you're probably bringing the USB feed back. I don't know if you have individual channels for each person. I don't know if that's possible with Zoom, but yeah, I would just apply a low cut / high pass filter and kind of dial that in. I'd start somewhere around 70 hertz, and if I don't know if you're using a digital audio workstation app, or if you're just using the MixPre, you just can set the frequency. In most digital audio workstation apps, you can actually set the frequency and how steep of a curve you want, so you can get a little more aggressive with the fall off. And it's usually represented in number of dB per octave or something like that, so you can change that curve a little bit. But high pass filter is really, I think, the number one thing you're probably looking for there. See, this is as soon as we get our mixer, this will be a lot easier. And actually the scalers, and so I can see the chat on the screen here.
That would be really nice. We are at time, unfortunately.
Do we have any more questions?
Many more.
Do we have any super chats we need to say thanks to?
We did that.
We did that. Okay, thanks, guys.
I need to apologize again to Sound Devices.
Don't worry about that.
I adore their mixers, and I'm sorry for laughing on the live.
That's
get the
quite
idea.
Okay. That's quite okay. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining us on the live stream today. If you'd like, for those that asked a question, I apologize that we missed it for today, but if you do want to go ahead and submit those for next week, we can definitely make sure they get on the agenda. Get out there and make some great sound, and we'll talk to you all again soon. Take care, everybody.